30 days with the Ruthless Millionaire. It was supposed to be just a contract, but he broke all the rules for her. A cold agreement, a dangerous attraction, and a secret capable of destroying 2 lives. Watch this story until the end. You'll be surprised by this story. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. Every day we post videos like this. Continuing. Emily always knew there were no miracles in the South Bronx, only opportunities that came with impossible prices to pay. So when she received the phone call that would change her life forever, she didn't feel relief. She felt fear. The voice on the other end of the line was polite, almost gentle, but carried the kind of authority she had only heard on television, in news reports about powerful men who moved billions as if they were pennies. "Miss Emily Parker," said the voice, and she immediately knew it wasn't a mistake. Nobody called her Miss in the South Bronx. "My name is Mark, assistant to Mr. Alexander Crawford. He would like to speak with you about a proposal that could definitively resolve your brother's situation." Alexander Crawford. Even people living in the projects knew that name. Owner of an empire that stretched from agribusiness to financial. Investments from mining companies to construction firms that erected the glass skyscrapers in downtown Manhattan. His face was always on magazine covers, sometimes as the most influential businessman in the country, sometimes involved in scandals that, for some reason, never managed to bring him down. Emily had seen his photo many times, perfectly styled. Dark hair, eyes that seemed to see through people, and a smile that promised both pleasure and destruction. The meeting would be in his office, on the top floor of a mirrored building on Wall Street. Emily arrived an hour early, sat in the coffee shop on the corner, and observed the movement. Men in impeccable suits came and went. Women in high heels walked with the confidence of those born into that world of glass and steel. She looked at her own reflection in the shop window, simple black dress, the only one she owned without patches, brown hair tied in a bun that tried to disguise the need for a decent haircut. 26 years old, graduated in business administration from a public university, 3 jobs to support her family, and now there, about to make a deal with the devil. At 38, Alexander Crawford commanded businesses that moved astronomical figures, but his true fortune lay in his ability to read people like financial reports. When Emily entered his office, he didn't need more than a few seconds to completely decipher her. Pride disguised by desperation, intelligence sharpened by survival, natural beauty she herself tried to hide, as if it were a weakness, and mainly an inner strength that most women in his social circle had lost long ago. "Miss Parker," he said, rising from his Italian leather armchair. The room was a temple to power. Paintings by contemporary American artists, panoramic view of the city, and such complete silence that Emily could hear her own racing heart. "Thank you for accepting my invitation." Emily wasn't intimidated by the luxury around her. She had grown up cleaning houses like that, knew that behind all ostentation there was always hidden dirt. "Mr. Crawford, I'll be direct. My brother owes money to very dangerous people. If you can resolve this, I need to know the price." Alexander smiled for the first time, and Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just found an interesting prey. Straight to the point. "I like that." He approached, stopping at a distance that wasn't intimate, but wasn't professional either. Emily could smell the expensive cologne, a fragrance that probably cost more than her monthly salary. "Your brother Tyler owes $300,000 to Charlie from Queens. I know this because my lawyers investigated the situation after I learned of your existence." "What do you mean, learned of my existence?" The question came out more aggressive than Emily intended, but she didn't apologize. You've worked at Mitchell and Associates law firm for 2 years. My lawyers noticed your dedication, your intelligence. When they discovered your family situation, they reported it to me. I'm always interested in people who manage to keep their heads up, even when everything is falling apart around them. Emily processed the information slowly. Mitchell and Associates was one of the largest law firms in the country, and she worked there as an administrative assistant. She never imagined her activities were being observed, much less reported to someone like Alexander Crawford. The sensation was both flattering and terrifying. "And what's the proposal?" she asked, crossing her arms in a defensive posture. Alexander returned behind his desk as if he needed the physical barrier to maintain control. "I need a companion, someone to accompany me to social events, business trips, important dinners, an elegant and intelligent female presence by my side." "An escort," Emily said, unable to hide the disdain in her voice. "A fictitious girlfriend," he corrected, and for the first time seemed slightly irritated. "My public image is being questioned due to some recent problems. I need to show personal stability, commitment, a solid family life. You would be perfect for this role." Emily laughed, a bitter sound that echoed through the luxurious room. "Perfect? Mr. Crawford, I come from the South Bronx. I don't know how to use a dessert fork. I don't know expensive wines. I've never been to a restaurant where the main course costs more than my rent. How would I be perfect for anything in your world?" Exactly because of that. His answer caught her off guard. Alexander leaned forward, his dark eyes fixed on hers. "The women in my social circle are predictable. Born rich, married rich, have empty conversations about expensive trips and imported jewelry. You're different. You have your own opinion, strength of character, natural beauty, and mainly, you have real reasons to be here, not just social ambition." "How long?" The question came automatically, as if her brain had already accepted the proposal before her consciousness fully processed it. 3 months. Time enough to consolidate my public image and resolve some delicate business issues. In exchange, your brother's debt will be paid in full. You'll receive a monthly salary of $50,000, and you'll have access to a complete wardrobe suitable for the situations we'll face. $50,000 monthly. Emily tried not to show her shock. It was more than 10 times what she earned working 3 jobs. In 3 months, she would have enough money to change her entire family's life, maybe even buy a decent house. "And what exactly would you expect from me?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain firm. Alexander stood up again, walking to the window. Down below, New York stretched infinitely, a concrete jungle where millions of people fought daily for survival. "Professionally, to accompany me to events, demonstrate genuine interest in business conversations, be a charming but respectful presence. Personally," he paused, as if carefully choosing his words. "Personally, I need you to be convincing. People need to believe we're in love." "In love," Emily repeated, testing the word as if it were poisonous. "There's a detailed contract that specifies all limits and expectations. There's nothing of an intimate nature required. If that's what concerns you, everything will be theater, but high-quality theater." Emily closed her eyes for a moment, thinking about Tyler. Her younger brother, only 19, had gotten involved with online gambling after losing his job. What began as a desperate attempt to get quick money transformed into an unpayable debt, with people who didn't hesitate to use violence to recover what was theirs. Last week they had appeared at her mother's house. Next week, it wouldn't be. Just an intimidating visit. "May I read the contract?" she finally asked. Alexander returned to the desk and handed her a leather folder. "Take it home, analyze it carefully, but I need an answer by tomorrow night. Your brother's situation doesn't allow much time for reflection." The threat was subtle but clear. Emily took the folder, feeling the weight of the expensive paper between her fingers. "And if I accept?" "If you accept, your life will change completely starting Monday. There will be a team of professionals to prepare your appearance. A personal trainer, etiquette classes if you deem necessary. You'll move to an apartment on the Upper East Side, close to mine, to facilitate our routine of commitments. And most importantly, your brother's debt will be settled this weekend." Emily nodded, not trusting her own voice. The proposal was both salvation and condemnation. She knew that accepting meant entering a world where she didn't know the rules, where every word and gesture would be analyzed and judged. But refusing meant watching her family's destruction. "Miss Parker," said Alexander when she was already at the door. Emily turned, meeting those dark eyes that seemed to see through her soul. "You're stronger than you think, and much more dangerous than I expected." That night, Emily read the entire contract 3 times. 27 pages of detailed clauses, specifications about public behavior, clothing, schedule of commitments, and at the end, a clause that particularly intrigued her. Both parties agree that in case of development of genuine feelings during the contractual period, the agreement may be renegotiated by mutual consent. She laughed alone in the small apartment she shared with her mother and brother. Genuine feelings for Alexander Crawford. The man was clearly dangerous, manipulative, accustomed to buying people like objects, but at the same time, there was something about him that intrigued her. A loneliness disguised as power, a vulnerability hidden behind arrogance. On Saturday morning, Emily called the number he had given. "I accept," she said simply when he answered. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure I don't have a choice, which is different." "Emily," said Alexander, and it was the first time he used just her name without formalities. His voice seemed different, more intimate, more real. "You always have a choice. This is just the least bad one." On Monday, Emily woke up in a penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side with a view of Central Park. In the closet, there were clothes that cost more than her annual income. On the dining table, a red rose and a card. "Welcome to the game. A." She touched the rose delicately, feeling the thorns against her fingers. Alexander Crawford had bought 3 months of her life, but Emily suspected that, in the end, the price would be much higher than either of them imagined. The first days in the Upper East Side apartment were like living in a dream that Emily wasn't sure she wanted to wake up from. Everything was too quiet, too clean, too perfect. In the morning, when she opened the motorized curtains with the remote control, she saw New York stretching below like an infinite urban carpet. At night, the city lights created an artificial constellation that hypnotized her, but it was the silence that disturbed her most, an expensive silence bought with double-glazed windows and acoustic insulation that blocked all sounds of real life. On the 3rd day, Emily was having breakfast on the balcony when the intercom rang. It was Carol, the image consultant Alexander had hired to polish her, as he had said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Carol was an elegant woman in her 50s, impeccably styled platinum hair, dressed with a precision that transformed even the simplest outfit into something sophisticated. "Darling," said Carol, entering the apartment as if it were her second home, "Alexander told me everything. 3 months to transform a rough diamond into a polished jewel. I love impossible challenges." Emily almost laughed at the comparison. "I'm not exactly a rough diamond. I'm more like just a common stone." "Nonsense." Carol examined her up and down with professional eyes. "Good bone structure, lovely skin, hair with fantastic potential. And that posture, you don't bow before anyone, do you?" That's rare. Most women I know are born already bowing. During the next 4 hours, Emily underwent a transformation that seemed straight out of a movie. Haircut at the most expensive salon in the city, where the stylist treated her like a work of art. Manicure, pedicure, facial treatment. Then, a photo session to create a book that would be used by Alexander's press team. Emily felt like a doll being prepared for a shop window. "Now comes the hardest part," said Carol when they returned to the apartment loaded with bags. "I'm going to teach you how to walk, talk, and behave like someone who has always belonged to this world. Not to change you, but to give you the necessary weapons to survive in it." During the following days, Emily learned things she never imagined were necessary. How to use different types of cutlery without hesitating. How to greet influential people without seeming intimidated. How to maintain a conversation about art, politics, and business without sounding forced. Carol was a demanding but gentle teacher, and gradually, Emily began to understand that this wasn't about becoming another person. It was about finding the version of herself that could circulate in any environment without fear. Alexander appeared at the apartment every day in the late afternoon, always impeccable, always in control. He observed Emily's training sessions from a distance, making precise comments about posture, tone of voice, facial expression. He was clinical, professional, but Emily began to notice small details that gave him away. The way his eyes lingered when she genuinely laughed at something, how he tensed when Carol adjusted her posture, touching her shoulder or waist, the way he looked away when she caught him watching. "Do you have a girlfriend?" Emily asked one afternoon, breaking the awkward silence that had settled after Carol left. They were in the living room, she on the sofa reviewing some articles about Alexander's companies that Carol had selected, he in the armchair with a glass of whiskey and some documents. Alexander raised his eyes, surprised by the direct question. "No." "Have you had one recently?" "Why the curiosity?" Emily closed the magazine and faced him. "Because in 2 weeks, I'll be at an event by your side pretending to be in love with you. It would be useful to know if any ex-girlfriend will appear to complicate our performance." Alexander drank the whiskey slowly, as if the liquid could give him time to think of an adequate answer. "I don't have relationships. I have arrangements." "What kind of arrangements?" "The kind that doesn't involve feelings." The answer was cold, final, but Emily saw something in his eyes that contradicted the coldness of his words. A sadness, perhaps, or a resignation. "It must be lonely," she said without thinking. "Loneliness is a luxury I can't afford. Lonely people make decisions based on emotions. In my world, that kills businesses and sometimes kills literally." The last phrase echoed in the air. Emily realized there was a layer of danger in Alexander's life that he hadn't explicitly mentioned, but that was always present, like a shadow. She decided not to insist on the subject, at least not yet. The first event was a charity gala at the Plaza Hotel, benefiting underprivileged children. Emily spent hours getting ready, helped by a team Alexander had hired: makeup artist, hairstylist, stylist. When she looked in the mirror, she almost didn't recognize herself. The dress was a deep blue that enhanced her eyes, custom-made by a famous designer. Her hair, now with a modern cut and subtle highlights, was tied in an elegant bun that left her neck exposed. The jewelry was borrowed from a luxury jeweler, diamond necklace and earrings worth more than a house. "You look beautiful," said Alexander when she came down to the garage. He wore a black tuxedo, was devastatingly elegant, but there was something in his eyes that went beyond professional approval. It was desire, pure and simple, barely disguised by the mask of control he always maintained. The driver took them to the hotel in silence. Emily tried to control her nerves, mentally reviewing everything she had learned from Carol. Alexander, at her side, checked his phone with the concentration of a general planning a battle. "Nervous?" he asked, without raising his eyes from the screen. "Terrified," Emily admitted. "And you?" Alexander finally looked at her, and for a second his mask slipped. "Always." The hotel was dazzling, decorated with white flowers and golden lighting. Hundreds of people circulated through the halls, all dressed as if they had stepped out of the pages of a luxury magazine. Emily recognized some faces from television: politicians, businessmen, famous artists. It was a world she only knew through screens, and now she was inside it. Alexander guided her through the halls with the ease of someone who knew every person present. His hand resting on her back was firm, possessive, but also protective. He introduced her as Emily, my girlfriend, and she smiled, shook hands, made polite conversation about art and philanthropy. Gradually, she realized she was doing well. Carol's lessons had worked. "You're doing very well," Alexander murmured in her ear during a pause in conversation. His warm breath against her skin sent a shiver down her spine. "I'm pretending there. All clients from the office where I worked," Emily murmured back. "Important people who need to be impressed, but who are just people at heart." Alexander smiled, a genuine smile, not the calculated mask he wore in public. Smart. Very smart. It was when they approached the buffet that Emily had her first real glimpse of who Alexander Crawford really was. A middle-aged man, grey hair and expensive suit, approached them with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Alexander, what a surprise to see you here." And accompanied, the man looked at Emily with a predatory curiosity that made her feel like an animal on display. "Richard," said Alexander, and Emily felt the tension in his voice. "Emily, this is Richard Morgan, owner of Morgan and Associates Construction." "Richard, my girlfriend, Emily Parker." Richard extended his hand to Emily, holding it a little longer than would be appropriate. "Enchanted. Alexander has always had good taste in business." The insinuation was clear and offensive. Emily felt her blood boil, but before she could respond, Alexander stepped forward. "Careful, Richard. Emily is not a business, and I protect what's mine." His voice was low, controlled, but there was an implicit threat that made Richard step back slightly. Of course. I didn't mean to offend." Richard laughed nervously. "Just, you know how the comments are out there. Your sudden lifestyle. Change, the new girlfriend appearing out of nowhere." "The comments don't interest me," said Alexander. "They should interest you much less, considering the problems your construction company has been facing with the district attorney's office." The threat was now explicit. Richard turned pale, muttered an apology, and quickly moved away. Emily looked at Alexander, impressed and a little frightened by the ease with which he had transformed a social situation into a demonstration of power. "Sorry," said Alexander, leading her to a more reserved corner. "Richard is an idiot, but a dangerous idiot. I didn't like the way he looked at you." "You didn't need to defend me like that," said Emily, although secretly she liked the protection. "Yes, I did." Alexander moved closer, his voice low and intense. "You're my responsibility. Now, nobody talks to you that way." Emily felt something stir in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the role she was playing. The way Alexander had defended her, the possessiveness in his voice, the genuine anger in his eyes. This wasn't part of the performance. It was real. The rest of the night passed without incident, but Emily couldn't get out of her head the way Alexander had reacted. During the ride back, they sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. "You did very well tonight," said Alexander when they reached her building. "Thank you. And thank you for that thing with Richard." Alexander stopped at the elevator door, looking at her with an intensity that made Emily feel naked despite the elegant dress. "Emily," he said, his voice lower than normal, "I need you to know that this is more complicated than I imagined." "What do you mean?" He moved closer, so close that Emily could smell his cologne, feel the heat of his body. "I mean that pretending to be in love with you is being easier than it should be." Emily's heart raced. There was something in the air between them, an electric tension that had nothing to do with contracts or arrangements. It was pure desire, pure chemistry, and both knew that stepping into this territory would be dangerous. "Alexander," she began, but he shook his head. "No, not tonight. You've had champagne, you look too beautiful, and I'm not thinking clearly." He took a step back, regaining control. "Good night, Emily." She watched him walk away, the sound of his steps echoing on the marble of the lobby. Alone in the elevator, Emily touched the diamond necklace she still wore and realized her hands were trembling. It wasn't fear, it was anticipation. That night, lying in the king-size bed of the luxurious apartment, Emily couldn't sleep. She went over every moment of the night, every look from Alexander, every word exchanged. She was beginning to understand that the greatest danger of that agreement wasn't the world of luxury and power into which she had been inserted. It was the man who had brought her to it. Alexander Crawford was dangerous not only for the power he wielded or the enemies he had accumulated. He was dangerous because he was making Emily question everything she thought she knew about herself, about what she wanted from life, about the price she was willing to pay for her family's safety. And the scariest thing of all, she was beginning to think it might be worth finding out. The following weeks passed in a dangerous dance of proximity and distance. Alexander and Emily had found a rhythm. He picked her up for events, business dinners, social meetings, and she played her role with a perfection that impressed even him. But something was changing between them, an electric current that ran through every look, every accidental touch, every moment of shared silence. Emily had gotten used to luxury with an ease that surprised her, not because she liked the ostentation, but because she discovered she could use that world as a tool. At business dinners, she observed the power dynamics with the same attention she previously dedicated to surviving in the Bronx. At social events, she identified alliances and rivalries like reading a map. And gradually, she began to realize that Alexander wasn't just staging a romance. He was waging a silent war. The first real sign of danger appeared on a rainy Thursday. Emily was in the apartment, working on some freelance translations she had decided to continue doing, a way to maintain sanity, according to herself, when the intercom rang. She wasn't expecting visitors. Alexander was in Washington, D.C. for a meeting with cabinet members and wouldn't return until the next day. "Hi, it's Michael from the building," said the voice on the intercom. "There's a delivery here for you, ma'am." Emily frowned. She hadn't ordered anything, and the doorman always notified about deliveries. But she went down anyway, led by curiosity. On the ground floor, there was no Michael. There were two men in dark suits waiting for her, and one of them she immediately recognized. He was one of the collectors who had threatened her brother months before. "Emily Parker," said the man, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "We need to talk." Her heart raced, but years living in the Bronx had taught Emily not to show fear. "My brother doesn't owe anything anymore. The debt was paid." "Yes, it was paid. By your millionaire boyfriend." The man moved closer, completely ignoring the doorman, who was watching the situation with growing nervousness. "But it happens that our investigation discovered interesting things about how that payment happened." "I don't know what you're talking about." "No, Then let me clarify. Alexander Crawford not only paid your brother's debt, he sabotaged $3 million contracts of our employers to get the money. He broke agreements that had existed for years. He made some very powerful men lose a lot of money. Emily felt her blood freeze. She didn't know the details of how Alexander had gotten the money to pay off the debt. But now she was beginning to understand that the price had been much higher than she imagined. What do you want? We want you to help us recover what we lost. You have access to his schedule, meetings, business. We want information. Never. The response came automatically, firm. The man laughed. You haven't even heard our proposal yet. $5 million in cash. For you and your family to disappear from New York and start a new life far from all this confusion. $5 million. Emily tried to process the amount. It was enough money to buy a house, pay for college for her brother, ensure her mother would never have to work cleaning other people's houses again. It was total freedom. And if I refuse, the man's smile became crueler. Well, then things get complicated. An accident might happen to your brother or to your mother. Accidents happen a lot in New York, don't they? The threat was clear. Emily looked around. The doorman had moved away, probably instructed to give privacy for the conversation. She was alone with two dangerous men, without Alexander nearby, without protection beyond her own intelligence. I need to think, she finally said. You have 3 days. Friday night, 8 o'clock, at the Rainbow Room. Table reserved under she. Parker, you come alone and give us an answer. And Emily, he leaned closer, and she could smell the scent of cigarettes and violence emanating from him. Don't make the mistake of telling your boyfriend about this conversation. He has powerful enemies. If they know he's being investigated, they might decide it's easier to eliminate him directly. The men left as quickly as they had appeared, leaving. Emily alone in the lobby with trembling legs and 1,000 questions spinning in her head. She went up to the apartment in panic, trying to process what had just happened. Alexander had lied to her. He hadn't just paid Tyler's debt. He had risked his own empire, made dangerous enemies, put his own life at risk. For her family. The question that tormented her most was, why? Alexander returned from Washington on Friday morning, earlier than expected. Emily was in the kitchen having coffee, trying to appear normal, but he knew her too well not to notice something was wrong. What happened? He asked without preamble, dropping his briefcase and walking directly to her. Nothing. Why do you ask? Because you have dark circles, your hands are trembling, and you're avoiding looking me in the eyes. Alexander put his hands on her face, forcing her to face him. Emily, what happened? For a moment, she almost told him everything. Almost collapsed in his arms and shared the weight of that terrible secret. But then she remembered the threat. If Alexander knew, he would be in even greater danger, and she couldn't allow that. I'm just tired, I didn't sleep well. Alexander didn't believe her, but didn't insist. During the day, he was more attentive, more protective. He canceled a meeting to have lunch with her, came home earlier, kept himself physically close, as if he could protect her just with his presence. Emily felt awful for lying, but at the same time, something warm and dangerous grew in her chest every time he showed genuine concern for her. In the afternoon, when Alexander was in the office making calls, Emily found a forgotten folder on the dining table. It wasn't her intention to snoop, but some papers had fallen to the floor, and when she bent down to pick them up, she saw her own name on one of the documents. It was an investigation report dated 3 months earlier, a week before their first meeting. The document contained detailed information about her life, where she worked, where she lived, her family's financial situation, her brother's debt. But there was more. There were photos of her leaving work, getting on the bus, arriving home. There was a psychological analysis that described her as intelligent, resilient, with a strong sense of family loyalty and low probability of mercenary motivations. Emily felt the world spin around her. Alexander hadn't learned of her existence through the lawyers, as he had said. He had investigated her, studied her, specifically chosen her. Everything had been calculated from the beginning. With hands trembling with anger, she continued leafing through the papers. She found cancelled contracts, broken agreements, complex financial transactions she didn't completely understand, but that clearly involved astronomical amounts. Alexander had really risked everything to get her out of that situation. But why? And why had he lied about how he had found her? "Interesting reading," his voice said behind her. Emily turned, still holding the papers. Alexander was standing at the office door, his dark eyes fixed on her with a mixture of resignation and something that could be fear. "You investigated me," she said, her voice coming out calmer than she felt. "For months, even before approaching me." "Yes." "Why?" Alexander approached slowly, as if she were a frightened animal that might flee at any moment. "Because I needed someone specific, not just any beautiful or intelligent woman. I needed someone who was real, who had genuine reasons to be with me, who wasn't driven by social ambition, someone who was desperate enough to accept anything," Emily completed, the hurt evident in her voice. "No." The answer came quickly, almost desperately. "Someone who was strong enough to survive in my world without losing herself in it. Someone like you. And by chance, this strong person had a brother indebted to dangerous people. How convenient." Alexander closed his eyes, as if the accusation were a physical blow. When he opened them again, there was a vulnerability that Emily had never seen before. "Emily, do you want to know the truth? The whole truth?" "I think I deserve that, don't you?" He nodded, walking to the window. Outside, New York City bustled. In the late afternoon rush, millions of people living their lives without knowing that in that apartment, two destinies were being redefined. "My businesses have been under investigation by the district attorney for 6 months. Not for corruption, I've never been involved with that, but because some of my former partners made dirty deals and now are trying to drag me down with them. I need a clean image, personal stability, to show I'm different from them." Emily listened in silence, still processing everything. "When I learned about your situation, I saw an opportunity, but I also saw something more. I saw a woman who worked 3 jobs to support her family, who studied at a public university and graduated with honors, who never gave up even when everything was against her. I saw someone I could admire." The word admire hung in the air between them. "And you decided I would be perfect for your little show." "At first, yes. But Emily..." He turned to face her, and there was something raw, exposed in his eyes. "I didn't expect this to happen." "What?" "This. Us. The fact that pretending to be in love with you has become the easiest thing in the world because I'm not pretending anymore." Emily's heart stopped for a second. Alexander had just confessed that he was in love with her, not in a romantic moment with candles and flowers, in the middle of a discussion about lies and manipulation, and somehow that made the confession even more real. "Alexander, I know I betrayed you, that I lied, that I manipulated everything from the beginning. I know you probably hate me now, but you need to know that when I broke those contracts to get the money for your brother, when I risked everything I built, it wasn't for our agreement. It was because the idea of you being hurt, of your family suffering, drove me crazy." Emily looked at the papers still in her hands. Cold, calculating reports, but which had resulted in an action that cost Alexander more than she had ever imagined. He had lied about how he had found her, but he hadn't lied about being willing to sacrifice everything for her, which left her in an impossible position, because in 8 hours she would have to meet the men who wanted information about Alexander. She would have to choose between protecting him or protecting her family, and now she knew that any choice she made would destroy a part of herself. "Emily," said Alexander, moving closer, "I know I don't have the right to ask, but can you forgive me?" She looked at him, that powerful, feared man who controlled financial empires and played with billions as if they were pennies. But who was there in front of her asking for forgiveness like any ordinary person who had made a mistake? I don't know," she said honestly. "I don't know if I can forgive, and I don't know if I can trust you again, but I know that—" "What?" Emily made a decision that would change everything. "I know that I'm not pretending anymore either." The confession came out low, almost a whisper, but had the effect of thunder. Alexander took a step forward, then stopped, as if he didn't know if he had the right to approach. "Emily." "No, let me speak." She put the papers aside and faced him directly. "You lied, manipulated, investigated me as if I were an object to be acquired. That's unacceptable, but you also risked everything you have for my family, without asking anything in return, without demanding eternal gratitude. And that says something about who you really are." Alexander remained motionless, as if any movement could break the moment. "So, what do we do now?" he asked. Emily looked at the clock. 6:30. In an hour and a half, she would have to make the most difficult decision of her life. But first, there was something she needed to do. "Now," she said, approaching him slowly. "You're going to kiss me for real. Not for cameras, not for an audience, not to keep up appearances. You're going to kiss me because you want to, because you feel something real for me, and I'm going to kiss you back for the same reason." Alexander didn't need more invitation. He pulled her to him with an urgency that spoke of weeks of restraint, of sleepless nights, of repressed desire that finally found an outlet. The kiss was everything Emily had imagined and more, desperate, possessive, tender at the same time. It was the confession that neither had managed to put into words. When they separated, both were breathless. "Emily," murmured Alexander, his forehead resting against hers. "I don't want to pretend anymore. I don't want more contracts, clauses, deadlines. I want something real." "Me too," she whispered back. But even as she pronounced the words, Emily knew it might be too late. In less than 2 hours, she would have to choose between the man she loved and the family she had always protected. And any choice she made could destroy both. What Alexander didn't know was that the biggest test of their relationship was yet to come, and that Emily was about to discover exactly how far she was willing to go to protect the people she loved. Emily looked at the clock one more time, 7:15. In 45 minutes, she should be at the Rainbow Room to give an answer that could destroy the man she had just confessed to loving. Alexander was in the shower, and she could hear the sound of water hitting the glass, completely unaware of the fact that his life was hanging by a thread. She picked up her phone with trembling hands and dialed Tyler's number. She needed to hear his voice to make sure he was okay before making any decision. "Hey, sis," said her brother, his voice too cheerful for someone who had been in mortal danger a few months earlier. "Everything okay? You've been acting strange lately." "Tyler, where are you?" "At home. Why?" "Sis, are you okay? Your voice sounds weird." Emily closed her eyes, feeling momentary relief. He was safe. For now. "Listen, I need you and Mom to leave the house tonight. Go to Aunt Mary's place in Jersey City and don't come back until I call." "Emily, what the hell is going on? You're scaring me. Please, Tyler, just do what I'm asking. It's important." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Tyler knew his sister too well to argue when she used that tone. all right, but you owe me a huge explanation." "I know, I love you, bro." She hung up before he could respond. At least her family would be far from immediate danger. Now she needed to deal with Alexander's situation. When he came out of the shower, he found Emily sitting on the edge of the bed, still dressed in the same clothes from earlier in the day, staring at nothing with an expression he couldn't decipher. "Emily, what's wrong?" She looked at him, wet hair, a towel tied around his waist, water drops still running down his defined chest. A few hours earlier, that sight would have made her heart race with desire. Now, it made it race with desperation. "Alexander, I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it." Something in her tone made Alexander immediately alert. He dressed quickly without taking his eyes off her. "Tell me." Emily told him everything. The visit from the collectors, the threat to her family, the ultimatum, the meeting scheduled for 40 minutes from now. With each word, she saw Alexander become more tense, more furious, more dangerous. "Why didn't you tell me before?" he asked when she finished, his voice low and controlled in a way that was more frightening than any shout. "Because they said that if you knew, they could kill you directly. And because..." She hesitated, then decided to be completely honest. "Because I discovered you lied about how you found me, and I didn't know if I could trust you." Alexander ran his hands through his hair, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "Emily, you don't understand the gravity of the situation. These men don't work alone. They represent people who have political connections, police, judicial. If you go to this meeting, if I don't go, they'll go after my family. And if you go, they'll kill you as soon as they get what they want. Or worse, they'll use you as a hostage to blackmail me indefinitely." Emily felt her blood freeze. She hadn't thought of that possibility. "So what do we do?" Alexander stopped, pacing, and looked at her directly. "We're going to end this, once and for all." "How?" "You'll go to the meeting, but not alone." Before Emily could protest, Alexander was dialing on his phone. He spoke quickly in a professional tone she had never heard. "Carlos, I need you and the team at the Rainbow Room in 20 minutes. Code red situation, yes, her. No, it's not optional. Mobilize everyone you have available." He hung up and turned to Emily, who was looking at him with a mixture of fear and admiration. "Alexander, what team is this?" "Private security, ex-military, ex-federal agents, people who have worked with me for years and whom I trust with my life." He approached her, putting his hands on her shoulders. "Emily, you need to understand something. I didn't build what I built by being naive. I always knew that someday dangerous people would come after me, and I always prepared for that. You're talking about turning a restaurant into a battlefield. I'm talking about protecting the woman I love and ending a threat that could haunt us for the rest of our lives." The declaration of love, said so naturally in the midst of that tense situation, made Emily's heart do a somersault. But there was no time for romance. And if it goes wrong? If someone gets hurt? Alexander pulled her to him, kissing her forehead, with a tenderness that contrasted with the hardness in his eyes. "It won't go wrong, but Emily, I need you to trust me completely. Can you do that?" She looked at that man who had lied to her, manipulated her situation, but also had risked everything to protect her, who had confessed to being in love in the middle of a crisis, who was willing to face dangerous criminals for her. "I can," she said, and meant every word. The Rainbow Room was busy as always at 8 o'clock on a Friday night. Emily entered alone, as she had been instructed, but she knew that at least 6 of Alexander's men were strategically positioned throughout the restaurant. She wore a small microphone hidden in her necklace and an almost invisible earpiece. "You look beautiful," Alexander's voice murmured in the earpiece. "And very brave. Remember, keep them talking. We need to know exactly who they are and what they want. Emily found the table reserved under Parker. It was empty, but 2 minutes later the men appeared. They weren't the same ones from the visit to the building. These were better dressed, more dangerous, with the deadly quietness of those accustomed to violence. "Miss Parker," said the taller one, sitting across from her, "we hope you have good news for us." "Before anything, I want to know who I'm really talking to," said Emily, surprising herself with the firmness of her own voice. "You're not simple collectors. Who are you?" The men exchanged glances. "Let's say we represent investors who were harmed by your boyfriend's questionable maneuvers." "What investors?" "That's none of your business. What matters is that Alexander Crawford owes a lot of money to many important people, and you're going to help us recover that money." Emily could hear Alexander breathing heavily in the earpiece. She knew he was controlling himself not to act before the right time. "How?" she asked. "Information, bank accounts, transfer codes, details about future business, access to his computers, documents. You're the girlfriend, you have access to everything. And if I do this, you'll leave my family alone?" The man laughed, an unpleasant sound that made Emily shrink back. "Your family? Darling, your family is the least of your problems. Do you really think we're going to leave you alive after getting what we want? You know too much." The explicit threat was all Alexander needed to hear. His voice in the earpiece was low, lethal. Now. What happened next was too fast for Emily to fully process. Men appeared from various directions at the same time. There were no shots. Alexander had been specific about not wanting innocent people injured, but there was a demonstration of force so coordinated and efficient that the criminals were immobilized in less than 30 seconds. "Federal agents," said one of Alexander's men, showing badges that Emily didn't even know existed. "You're under arrest for extortion, threats, and criminal conspiracy." That's when Emily understood that Alexander had planned much more than she had imagined. They weren't just private security, they were real federal agents working in an official operation. Alexander appeared out of nowhere beside her, pulling her from the chair and away from the confusion. "Are you okay?" "Alexander, what the hell is happening? Those were real federal agents." He guided her to a reserved corner of the restaurant, away from the curious looks of other customers. "Emily, remember when I said my businesses were being investigated by the district attorney?" "I remember." "They weren't being investigated. I was collaborating with the investigation for months. The men who came after you today weren't ordinary collectors. They were part of a criminal organization that laundered money through illegal loans and violent collection." Emily felt her legs give way. Alexander supported her, leading her to sit down. "You're saying that..." "I'm saying that when I learned about your brother's situation, I saw an opportunity to get closer to this organization, not just to protect you, but to dismantle them completely. So I was..." "You were many things, Emily. You were an amazing woman who made me question everything I thought about relationships. You were an opportunity to do the right thing. You were..." He hesitated, then decided to be completely honest. "You were the person who made me realize that some risks are worth taking." Emily stared at him in silence for a long moment, processing. Everything? How many people knew about this? Just me, my lawyer, and the federal agent in charge of the operation. Not even my security team knew everything. And if it had gone wrong? If they had hurt me before the agents could act? Alexander moved closer, touching her face with a tenderness that contrasted with all the tension of the night. "Emily, if anything had happened to you, I would have spent the rest of my life blaming myself. I know I put you in danger. I know I should have told you everything from the beginning, but I also know it was the only way to end this threat definitively." So, now it's over? My family is safe? With tonight's arrests and the information the feds already had, the entire organization will be dismantled in the coming weeks. Your family is completely safe. Emily felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in months, she could breathe without fear. "Alexander," she said, looking directly into his eyes, "I need to know one thing, and I want the complete truth. Do you feel something real for me? Or was all this part of the plan from the beginning?" The question hung in the air between them. Alexander took time to answer, as if carefully choosing each word. "Emily, when I first saw you in those investigation reports, you were just a piece on a very complex chessboard. A beautiful, intelligent woman with the right motivations to accept my proposal. That was all you represented to me." Emily's heart sank. "But," he continued, "when you walked into my office that first day, everything changed. The way you faced me without fear, how you questioned every word I said, how you made it clear you were there out of necessity, not ambition. That's when I realized I had completely underestimated who you were." "Alexander, let me finish. Each day by your side showed me a new facet of you. Your genuine intelligence, your strength, your loyalty to family, the way you adapt to new situations without losing your essence. And yes, also your beauty, your smile, the way you look when you're concentrating on reading something." He paused, taking a deep breath. "What I feel for you stopped being pretense a long time ago, Emily. Probably since that first night at the plaza, when you defended me from Richard without even realizing it. Or maybe when I woke up in the morning, and the first thing I thought about was how you were sleeping. I don't know exactly when it happened, but I know it's real." Emily felt her eyes filling with tears, "even knowing I could have betrayed you, that I could have passed information to the criminals. Even knowing that. Because I trust who you are, Emily. I trust the woman who works 3 jobs to support her family, who studies at night after a full day of work, who accepts a dangerous agreement to save her brother. That woman would never betray someone for money." "But I thought about it," she admitted, the tears finally falling. "For a moment, when they offered $5 million, I thought about it. I imagined how it would be to give a better life to my mother, to Tyler. And why didn't you accept?" Emily laughed through the tears. "Because I realized that as much as I love my family, I couldn't live with myself knowing I betrayed you. And because..." She hesitated, then decided to be as honest as he had been. "Because I really fell in love with you, not with the powerful man, not with the money or the luxury. I fell in love with the man who gets worried when I don't sleep well, who defends me from idiots at parties, who is willing to risk everything to protect my family." Alexander pulled her to him, kissing her with an intensity that spoke of months, of tension, of fear, of repressed love finally finding an outlet. When they separated, both were breathless. "So what happens now?" asked Emily. "The contract term is over, the threat to my family is over, the need to pretend is over." "Now," said Alexander, holding her face between his hands, "now we really begin. No contracts, no deadlines, no pretending. Just you and me discovering what we've built together." "This won't be easy," Emily said, being realistic. "We're from completely different worlds. I still have a lot to learn about your world. And you, well, I think you have a lot to learn about what it's like to have a girlfriend who wasn't born rich." Alexander smiled, that genuine smile she had learned to distinguish from the social mask. "Emily, I've spent the last 2 months discovering that I prefer a woman who questions my decisions to 10 who agree with everything I say. I prefer someone who forces me to be a better person to someone who accepts my flaws without question. And I definitely prefer someone I truly love to any convenient arrangement I could have." even if it means having to explain to New York society why you're dating a girl from the Bronx. Especially if it means that. Let them talk. In the end, the opinion that matters is ours. Emily smiled, feeling as if she could finally relax after months of tension. So that's it? We're a real couple now. We're a real couple now, confirmed Alexander. And Emily? Yes? Welcome to my real life. Not the edited version I show the world, the complete version, with flaws, complications, and a man who discovered he's completely in love with an extraordinary woman. 6 months later, Emily woke up in the apartment they now officially shared, no longer by contract but by choice. Through the window she could see New York waking up to another day, but now the city no longer seemed like a concrete jungle where she struggled to survive. It seemed like a place full of possibilities. Alexander was already awake, working on his laptop in bed next to her, reading glasses on his nose and a coffee cup on the nightstand. She observed for a moment his concentration, the way he slightly furrowed his brow when he was focused. "Good morning," she murmured, leaning against him. "Good morning, love," he replied, closing the laptop and turning to kiss her. "Did you sleep well? Very well. What time did you wake up?" "Around 5. I had some things to resolve before the 9 o'clock meeting." Emily stretched, enjoying the luxury of waking up slowly. She had gotten used to that rhythm, but had never lost the gratitude for it. Every day was a reminder of how life could completely change. "Alexander," she said, propping herself on her elbow to look at him better. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you regret it? Looking for me, risking everything, complicating your life with all these problems?" Alexander stopped what he was doing and faced her with full attention. "Emily Parker, are you crazy? You're the best thing that ever happened in my life. Why would I regret it? Because your life was simpler before. Without family dramas, without criminals, without having to explain to everyone why you're with someone like me." "Someone like you," Alexander repeated, pulling her closer. "An intelligent, brave, loyal, beautiful woman who makes me laugh, who challenges me, who makes me want to be a better man every day. Yes, my life is more complicated now. It's also infinitely more interesting, more meaningful, more alive." Emily smiled, feeling that familiar warmth spreading through her chest. "I love you, Alexander Crawford. And I love you, Emily Parker, more than I imagined it was possible to love someone." They stayed like that for a few minutes, simply enjoying the peace of the morning, the luxury of being together, without rush, without fear, without secrets between them. Alexander's phone rang, interrupting the moment. He looked at the screen and sighed. "I need to answer. It's about the expansion to the Midwest." "Go ahead," said Emily, kissing his cheek. "I'll make breakfast for both of us." Hakim. While preparing coffee in the gourmet kitchen of the apartment, Emily reflected on how she had gotten there. 6 months earlier, she was a desperate woman accepting a dangerous agreement to save her family. Now, she was a woman in love building, a life beside the man she loved. It hadn't been easy. There were adjustments, discussions, moments of doubt. Emily had to learn to navigate a world of privilege that sometimes made her feel like a stranger. Alexander had to learn that having a girlfriend meant sharing decisions, considering another person, giving up absolute control over his own life. But there was also laughter, discoveries, moments of intimacy that no contract could have predicted. There was the way Alexander looked at her when she talked about her dreams of working with NGOs that helped underprivileged communities. There was how Emily had learned to read his expressions, to know when he was worried about business even, when trying to hide it. There were the nights they stayed up late talking about everything and nothing, discovering layers of each other they had never shown to anyone. "Emily!" Alexander called from the living room. "Come here for a second." She went there and found him standing near the window, a strange expression on his face. "What is it?" "I just received a very interesting proposal. An American company wants to form a joint venture with me to expand operations in Latin America. It would be an incredible opportunity, but it would mean spending 6 months a year in Miami, at least in the beginning, and I don't want to make this decision alone." Emily looked at him, completely understanding what he was saying. He was asking not just for her opinion, but for her participation in the decision. He was recognizing that their life was built together, that important choices should be made jointly. "Well," she said, approaching and adjusting his tie in a gesture that had become automatic, "I think Miami has beautiful beaches, and my Spanish is much better after those classes you insisted I take." Alexander smiled, that smile that was only hers. "So you would be up for it? Moving to another state? Starting everything over again?" "Agreed," said Alexander. 6 months ago, I was living in a 2-room apartment in the South Bronx. Now I live in an Upper East Side penthouse with the man I love. If I've learned anything, it's that changes can be good, especially when you're not facing them alone. He kissed her then, right there in the middle of the sunny living room, with New York stretching infinitely outside and a future full of possibilities opening up before them. When they separated, Emily knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice that day months ago, when she accepted Alexander Crawford's impossible proposal, not just because she had saved her family or changed her financial situation, but because she had found something she didn't know she was looking for. A love that was real, complicated, imperfect, but absolutely true. And for the first time in